Good afternoon, guys. Lexus Driver here. Now, you guys are wondering why I have here a map of New York City. Well, um, aside from being a YouTuber, I also like to write. I always like to write non. I wouldn't say nonfiction. I always like to write. I always like to write my own story, like fictional stories. And now this city here is New York. Um, if you guys are GTA, if you guys are GTA 4 players, Liberty City is based in New York. Um, GTA 4 and GTA Liberty City stories, along with GTA 3, they're all set in Liberty City, which is based in New York. But the only part of New York that never gets a lot of love and not a lot of representation in movies and video games is this one, Staten Island. Now, if I write my own story or make my own game or like whatever I have that takes place in New York, I always like to include all five boroughs because in GTA Liberty City in GTA 4, which is set in Liberty City, they only have four boroughs, unlike real life New York, which actually has five boroughs. Broker is based on Brooklyn. Queens is Dukes is based in Queens. Algonquin is based in Manhattan, and Bohan is based in the Bronx. But Alderney, that's actually based in the Jersey area. Um, you know, as much if I haven't played GTA 4, I did play Liberty City Stories, but I haven't played GTA 3. But you know, if GTA 4 gets a definitive edition, when I say definitive edition, a lot like Mafia Definitive Edition, a new map and whatnot. I really hope they would include Staten Island because Staten Island, I feel like that's the only borough of New York that never gets a lot of representation in movies and video games. Because Staten Island, if you think of it, Staten Island is actually the most suburban part of New York. There's a lot of houses, there's even apartments. Don't get me wrong. There's even apartments in Staten Island, but as much as I like New York, I like Manhattan, but if there's one borough I like the most other than Manhattan, it would always be Staten Island. So Staten Island, like you know, uh, when I write my fictional book, um, I always like to start here. My main character, after years of hiding in Halifax, Canada, this is where his new home would be, Staten Island, and and as the story progresses, he still has his home in Staten Island, but in the events of the story, he'll have to move to a new move to a new part. Like I wouldn't say move to a new part, move to a part where he would lie low. So he has so my main character would have a home in Staten Island, but due to the events of the stories, he has to leave Staten Island and then settle in an apartment in Brooklyn. I'm doing this in patterns. Like my main character will have a home in Staten Island, an apartment in Brooklyn, a house in Queens, an apartment in Manhattan, and then a house in the Bronx. So. Bit of a pattern here. Staten Island, house. Brooklyn, apartment. Queens, house. Manhattan, apartment. And the Bronx, a house. And also, for when I'm writing, when I have a good location of a story, I like to include. I'm also going to be including not just New York but also Jersey. But since if the story is heavily set in New York, I'll just only include. I'll just only include New York. I'll still include the cities that are in New Jersey, like Newark, Jersey City. But if it's hardcore New York, I will only I will include New York City and the whole state of New York. Like um, the reason why I like to include the whole state of New York, because like I said, if it's if the city if my story if my fictional story takes place in New York, I'll include New York City, the cities in New Jersey, only the cities that are within the New York metropolitan area. That includes Jersey City and Newark. But since it's if it's a hardcore if the story takes place in New York, all of New York, I would include both New York and New York State, with some exceptions. I'll include some cities in the metropolitan area. Also, Long Island, because that includes the beaches there. So yeah, that's what I think of when I write a fictional story that takes place in New York City. I'll include the cities in the New York metropolitan area, and also the state of New York. For those who are going camping, or even, you know what I mean. So if it's hardcore New York, the cities in New York, in the New York metropolitan area, New York City, Jersey City, Newark, and also. The state of New York. But if I have a story, if I have a fictional story that takes place in New Jersey, I'll include New York City, but I'll only include New York City, Jersey City, Newark, and the rest of the state of New Jersey. So that's how I would like to do when I write a fictional story. If it's New York, New York City, Jersey City, Newark, and the state of New York. If it's the cities in Jersey, like Jersey City, Trenton, or like Newark, then it'll be those cities with some in New York. But for the state, for the countryside, when it comes to camping, it'll be the whole state of New Jersey. So that's how I like to do whenever I do a fictional story. And the fictional stories I've been doing, I've been inspired by a lot of movies, TV shows, and even video games. So yeah, that's how I like to view. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. On the next video, I'm going to talk about the West Coast, which I would say is my favorite part of the United States. I like New York, but West Coast is the best place to go when you start your first adventure if you're crossing the Pacific. So anyway, guys, see you in part 2.